So the blind spot is not understanding our own behavior, or not necessarily where they came from, but why we do them, and recognizing that we can change our behaviors. We can change the way we look at the world. We can change the way we lead. We can change the way we interact with people. CEO has to deal with many things often they've never dealt with before. The CEOs who get fired keep going back to the old way of doing things. If they can adjust and learn, then they're going to help the company grow. I guarantee there are CEOs out there today who are not going to call me because they're using ChatGPT. That's a threat. In the organizational design of companies of the future, we will have a mix of AI agents and humans. I think that we're going to see the human at the top. Agents on their leadership team, and they're going to have humans on their leadership team. So that's why I encourage every CEO in particular to be on top of what's happening so that they can design their organization the right way. They can be ahead of their competitors, and they don't get left behind.
Thank you, Glenn, for coming on our podcast. It's a pleasure speaking with you. Previously, you have an amazing career with coaching, a lot of knowledge with executives. And today I understand we'll talk about coaching and scaling CEOs. Maybe beginning with coaching, you've coached many CEOs at this point. Is there a particular blind spot that comes up even amongst the smartest of these CEOs that people overlook?
Absolutely, there is. And it has to do with the way we think about the world. So each of us, for me, for you, and for every CEO, we have what I call success patterns. These are actually neural networks, neural pathways in your brain that have been created through the experiences in your life. What you learn is that by doing certain things, you get a certain result. It's a good thing, right? It creates success when I know if I do the following things, let's say I'm empathetic in a particular conversation, that's going to help build a relationship with someone on my team, and they're going to become more loyal. That could be a success pattern. The challenge, the blind spot, is that we don't think about what these neural pathways are. We just operate inside of them. And we operate inside of them because they work until they don't. That's the blind spot. When the things that have always worked for us are no longer working, we feel stuck. CEOs feel stuck, and they don't even know why.
Mhm.
So the blind spot is not understanding our own behaviors and where, or not necessarily where they came from, but why we do them, and recognizing that we can change our behaviors. We can change the way we look at the world. We can change the way we lead. We can change the way we interact with people if we choose to make those changes. So a key part of my job is to help CEOs understand when it's time to change. And this is why, as we talked about earlier, my podcast is called The Scaling CEO. This is how one of the key elements of scaling a company is for the CEO themselves to scale themselves, meaning they have to evolve and create new ways of being. And a lot of my work is around helping that CEO become a better person, a better CEO themselves, so they can grow the company.
Yeah. I've heard it said that the company can only grow as high as the CEO, like the level of the CEO.
And it's well said, yeah.
Your
And you
description.
ask yourself for example, in the venture world, as an example, in a 5-year period, roughly 60% of the CEOs get fired.
Wow.
You go, wow, why do they get fired? Well, they get fired because they're not growing the company fast enough. But the question is, why aren't they growing the company fast enough? Because when they got the money from the venture capitalists, they were the right CEO for that company at that time. Almost by definition, they were the right CEO. That's how they got the money. But then the company grows, and you add new people, add new capabilities, new products, new customers, new channel partners, and the CEO has to deal with many things often they've never dealt with before. And that's the scaling journey. How do they deal with all these new things that are occurring to them, are showing up in their world? And if they can adjust and learn all these new capabilities, then they're going to help the company grow. But the CEOs who get fired Keep going back to the old way of doing things. Keep focusing on the thing that they're good at. I have, for example, one of my CEOs, successful company, he's still coding. We're working really hard to pull him out of that because that's where his happy place is. That's where he's
Uh,
excellent. But that's not the job of the CEO.
mhm.
And the good news is he recognizes that now and he's breaking away from that.
Your analogy earlier of kind of the reward structures that we have or the neural pathways, the image that came up in my mind was kind of showing up with the wrong kit on a sports pitch. So it's like I'm showing up to play soccer, but I'm in like a football kind of uniform
Right.
or hockey or whatever. And many of us do that. What is your process for unlocking this superpower eyesight or getting your clients to understand like I'm not, I'm playing on an outdated or inaccurate kind of framework?
Well, what's really interesting about my work is I don't really have an agenda when I'm working with the CEO. Is I let them start talking in every meeting session we have. I let them just talk about what's going on. And what's amazing about that is that the issue that's important comes to the surface. And I will explore that issue to make sure, is this an important thing that we need to focus on? Because if it's not, we're going to dismiss it quickly. But if the issue is important, I'm having difficult challenge with my board members. I'll start asking open-ended questions to understand what is really happening here. And then because I deal only with CEOs, there's a fascinating benefit, which is the following. No matter what is happening in the company, whether things are going well or they're not going well, it's the CEO's fault. Now, many CEOs don't want to hear that. And yet, when you really examine it, let's say, for example, people on the team are not doing exactly what the CEO needs them to do. So, something about the CEO is enabling that behavior. One of the most powerful statements you can make is it, what is it about your behavior that's enabling that behavior? So either the CEO didn't focus on culture enough, or didn't give clear enough instructions, or hired the wrong people, or built the wrong team, or is pursuing something that isn't going to benefit the company because there's some crazy idea and the team doesn't believe in it. So it always comes back to the CEO. So if things are not going well, we're going to focus on the CEO. I am going to focus on the CEO about what is it about the way you're thinking about this, the way you're leading your team, the way you're communicating that isn't working. And sometimes it's uncomfortable. We're going to go places where I'm going to say we're going to have to go work on something that you may not enjoy doing. Might have some difficult conversations with your team. But I tell them, here's a great way to do it. I tell the story about Sheryl Sandberg back when she was running most of Facebook. And I heard her speak on this topic, so I love this example. She said, at one point, my team wasn't doing what I wanted them to do. And I was very upset about this. And so I brought everybody together and I said, you are not doing what I want you to do. But then she said the magic phrase. She said, and that's on me. And what's amazing about that is she took responsibility. She recognized that it was her behavior that was enabling this team not to perform the way she wanted to. And the beauty of that is twofold. One, people never in her organization did not feel blamed. So no one got defensive because when you have a defensive response, it's very difficult to change people's behavior. And people honor a leader who's willing to take the blame. And then it creates an opening for that leader now to step in and say, and here's how we're going to do things going forward.
Mhm,
I'm going to communicate to you in this way. I'm going to ask these things. I'm going to get feedback from you in this way because we're part of a team that is trying to accomplish something. And it's up to me to make sure that we're doing that.
mhm. Yeah, I think we like predictability and consistency, authenticity. So when a leader changes their strategy or changes their words or changes something about them without that communication as to the why, perhaps it can confuse people. Because I've seen people, to be honest, I've probably done this myself, say, okay, this is the change I need to make. But if you don't communicate to the team why you're doing it and showing that you're not above them, like better than them, um, that we just need to do this. And there's self-awareness. You're communicating self-awareness on the part of the leader, and you're communicating if then clauses. So you're giving them choice, you're giving them a map and letting them make the choice. Back to your earlier part, the CEOs need to make the choice in order to maybe change those neural pathways. Um, I can relate, but it's kind of ironic hearing it like from you out loud that there's discomfort around recognizing that you need to change. Because I say that's ironic because it's like, well, that would be great news, wouldn't it? Like if I had to change you, that'd be bad news because I don't know how to change you. I can't change you. It's like if you're like kind of if the answer is David, you have to change yourself. I'm like, woohoo, I got lucky. Like that's that.
Right.
But it's funny because I guess those neural pathways are really kind of wired to everything, and so it's almost like this like shock, like, oh no, the structure is going to fall down or something. What do you have any kind of thoughts as to why there's that discomfort around personal change?
Sure. I would venture that for you, for me, for every CEO out there, about 99% of what we do every day is already hardwired. These are the neural pathways. It's already hardwired. You don't even have to ask, why am I doing this the way I'm doing it? I'm doing it because I've been rewarded in the past for this behavior.
Mm,
So I just do it.
interesting.
I don't have to
Yeah.
think about it. And what I'm here to do is to break that, to help people recognize you can approach this in different ways. Just because you've been successful doing it this way before doesn't mean that
Mm,
that's the optimal way to do it.
mhm.
And a lot of this, David, has to do with person to person communication.
Okay.
As a leader, when you're the CEO, one of the most important things you need to work on is how well can you communicate to the people who report to you so that they understand precisely what you're looking for them to do for you
Mhm,
and that they are not disconnected from that in any way. They're crystal clear and aligned and motivated to get that done.
mhm,
And there's a lot of work to be done there by every single CEO on how to become better at that. But if you become self aware, you used the phrase self aware earlier. If
mhm,
you become self aware as a CEO, you recognize I can change. And frankly, that's one of my key roles. So I might talk to a CEO about a challenging relationship they have with someone on their team. And I said, let's talk this through. Here's some language I'm going to recommend you use in that conversation. And I'll
mhm,
see discomfort. Like, I don't talk that way, right? And I'll say, well, here's why I'm recommending you use that language.
mhm,
Because what we're trying to do is open up the ears of the person you're talking to so they're in a position of listening as opposed to a position of being defensive.
mhm,
And if you're trying to change someone's behavior on your team and they're being defensive, they're not going to change anytime soon. But if you create an environment where they want to listen, they want to change, here's how you do that. And so we'll go through using the specific words to enter the conversation.
Are you able to share a story where one of your coaching, like as a result of your coaching, directly contributed to a major business breakthrough?
So, yes, I'm going to share it this way. This has to do with the way CEOs think of themselves. So I had a CEO who we started our coaching call and he was depressed. He said, Glenn, we missed our number for Q3. And that was so important to him to make the number for Q3, the revenue number for Q3. He missed the number. And I said, oh, well, tell me more about that. Well, we had a goal of X and we came in at 97% of X. He said, but we didn't make the number. He was so hardwired that success to him meant making the number that he was literally depressed. I said, you just had the best quarter your company has ever had. I said, this is about the way you're framing things. You're framing 97% as a failure, when in fact you had the best quarter in company's history because it was a high growth company. What I want you to do is to first of all recognize that you are being extremely hard on yourself, which is not effective and not going to help with your performance and not going to motivate your team because you're being so difficult on yourself. I need you to reframe this situation to recognize what you've actually accomplished. And I need you to go around and reward your team members, at least verbally, and acknowledge what they have accomplished. Because if you, as the CEO, are depressed about coming up just a little bit short, everyone on your team is going to be depressed and not motivated because there's no reward here at this company. We just had the best quarter we ever had. Why am I working here if nobody cares?
Mhm.
So it's not just about the CEO. You need to shift and reframe the situation.
Yeah.
So that was not about Q3. That was about how the CEO should lead the team and recognizing what they went through on their own and the impact they would have on everyone.
Mhm.
And so that became a way that we continually worked on is how are you acknowledging successes both within yourself and your team, irrespective of whether or not you're exactly meeting the goals. And that created a whole new culture in the company, which is what we were searching for, what I was searching for to help with, is how do we create a culture of reward for success as opposed to being depressed because we got an A minus instead of an A.
That sounds like $1 million question there. I could see perhaps it starts at the top or perhaps it starts at the bottom, but to follow that lead, where like how do you change a culture or start a culture that is more in tune with what you described?
You do it through stories. So if
Okay.
you need to have a vision and mission, and then you need to have your stated values, but people don't remember what the values are. If I were to say, what are the values of your company? Um, Most CEOs go, let me look it up. It's written out somewhere.
Right.
That's not a managed culture.
Well, it's not
That's
believed.
well, and it's not believed. You're right. Instead, one of my CEOs, I call him a black belt in culture.
Okay.
And what he does, David, is he says, here are our five values. And he talks about them often. That's one thing that you do. You have to repeat and repeat and repeat. But more importantly, what he does is when someone does something in the company, it could be an individual contributor, could be a senior leader, doesn't matter, that embodies that value, he tells the whole company the story about what that person accomplished. So he might say, David worked all weekend to make sure that our product launch was going to happen on Monday morning, even though we had the challenge over here and getting the marketing team aligned and getting the code frozen at the right time. But David made that happen. And that matches one of our values, which is persistence, let's say. But people won't remember persistence as much as they'll remember the story I just told about David.
Right.
Because what the CEO is searching for, and I give him a lot of credit here, this is a great way to think about this. He said, we're going to hire some new person next month in some role. And they're going to, within a short period of time, they're going to they're going to have to make a decision in the moment. How do they know what decision to make? They're going to bring with them their old way of thinking. I need them to use our values as a way to make decisions when there's nobody else to ask. And so if that person hears the story about what David did over the weekend, they connect that persistence, as an example, is one value. So I now know as a new employee how to act. It becomes part of how everybody works. That's how you create culture.
That's a great example. That makes a lot of sense when you tell it. It's kind of like visualizing for success, or giving people the ingredients that they're more. There's a higher probability that they'll be going in the direction of the company's goals.
That's right.
That's deceptively powerful, I think, um, because I can relate too to having more work than I can fit into a day. As far as, oh, this really should, it'd be great if it was done today, or it really should be done today. But I feel like that's always going to be the case. And there's a rule which you might know, and if you do, please remind me, that work fills whatever time it has. So if you
Right.
stop at 6, you'll learn to just prioritize and get whatever you need to get done in that time. Do you know what
Right.
I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
I think it's one of Parkinson's laws is
Yes, that
that
was it.
work will fill the time made available. And that's dangerous, right? Because
In both directions, or in the when you don't have a hard stop.
when you don't have a hard stop,
Yeah.
um, then yeah, I'm just going to do another layer on top of this. I'm going to make this a little bit better,
Right.
or I'm going to answer more emails than I would otherwise, or more Slack messages, or I'm going to do more research, sort of in search of a goal that's never going to be achieved. However, going back to the world of the CEO, a lot of the work that I do with them is prioritization. Sounds kind of
Yeah.
simple on the surface, but this
Not
is
to
something
those who
I
know.
learned. This is something I learned. I didn't mention this, but I had a coach for 17 years while I was a CEO for 25 years, and
The
it was
same
a
coach?
same coach,
Wow.
transformational experience. And one of the things she taught me was she said, "Glenn, show me your to-do list." And my to-do list looked like every CEO's to-do list. It was so long you didn't see the end of the list, right? It's just, oh,
Mhm.
we got to get this done, and this, I mean, this is important. And it, she said, "Well, tell me what are the three things you're going to get done today." And I looked at her like she had three heads. Like, what are you talking about? If I only got three things done, I wouldn't get all this done. And she said, "No, I need to know what are the three things that are most important on this list." And I couldn't do it, David, because what it meant was that I wasn't going to get 47 things done.
Mhm.
I was only going to get three.
Right.
And that was a very painful realization to me that I'm actually not going to get all these things done. Now, what on the positive side is I got to choose what are the most important things, and I got those done. So not only did I get them done and I moved my agenda forward, but I didn't waste time doing just a little bit on everything else. And you don't see progress when you do that.
Mm.
And so in prioritization, there's a question of what is truly important here. It could be urgent. It's probably important. It's probably strategic. I should really work on that and carve time out on my calendar to get that done. So I'm not checking email, I'm not checking text messages, I'm not looking at the latest Slack message that came in, because those are urgent issues that will take up my full day if I let them.
Mhm.
Instead, I'm going to carve out time to work on what's most important. It could be going to a baseball game, little league game in
Mhm.
the middle of the day, because
Mhm.
I want to watch my child on the field.
Mhm.
It doesn't move the business forward, but it moves my ultimate goal of having work life balance forward. It also means when I go to that baseball game, I'm not going to get some things done.
Mhm.
I have to be okay with that. It's a letting go
Yeah.
of the things that are always there in front of us that it will never go away. New ideas and people who want to do things and people who need more communication. But if I focus on the things that are most important, I'm going to move the needle.
I think that's the hardest thing to come to terms with, perhaps in life these days, given the optionality that we have with a endless stream of media and information across social media channels and streaming, etc. Like, I have some friends whose taste I like. Back in the day, we used to give each other book recommendations, and now it's like TV shows and movies, and I trust their advice. I simply don't have the time to watch all of the recommendations. So I just have
Right.
this growing document for the next life or whatever that I'll start with.
That's right.
Um, but it's a matter, I think, of like you described it, sounds almost Buddhist, where you're showing up kind of present, seeing the flow of consciousness or the flow of life, and then being selective, having a container and being selective, like what do I want? And it's okay to change your mind, but it's important, I think, to align with your desires or understand, like start from yourself. I think a lot of us have a starting anchor that's like outside of ourselves somehow.
Right. There's also, to your point, going back to the neural pathways,
Yeah.
a lot of what we do is driven by brain chemicals, brain hormones,
Okay.
dopamine being the most powerful one. But there's adrenaline and there's oxytocin and there are endorphins, all that are feel good chemicals.
Mm,
And that's our reward system. We do things because we get these rewards. And the people who run technology companies are smarter than you and I are at figuring out how to give me reward for liking a post
mm,
or checking an Instagram or seeing the latest travesty happening on X.
mm,
And we want to go there and we will spend all day long there if we aren't thinking about the long arc of our lives
mm.
and we're just letting the immediacy, the immediate reward drive our behavior. We're never going to be effective if we let that happen. And by the way, none of those things are important. And yet we just spent hours and hours lost in that world. So we want to be really conscious of the choices we make.
Well said. Are you familiar with the HBO series Succession?
I am familiar with it. I haven't watched it though.
Okay. I thought it would be fun to ask you how you would coach the three kind of main characters, because they each take turns, almost like musical chairs with the CEO chair, but
Yeah,
they have different
unfortunately, I'm not.
personalities.
I'm not familiar enough to help there.
Okay. Well, given our last kind of comment, I won't press you to watch it. I trust you to make decisions that are best for your time.
Yes.
I see that you have some experience with AI. You're an advisor of an AI company, and I mean it's everywhere. In that course that I mentioned, I was in. Some people thought it was a threat to the coaching industry. I'm sure people think some people think it's a threat to any industry, but I feel, and I've also heard people say that rather than a threat, it's disruptive, no question, but it's more of an expansion rather than a contraction. And the analogy that sometimes gets brought up is the Industrial Revolution kind of seemed to replace certain things, curtail what people had been known to expect, but then it expanded, unlike the global market, et cetera, unlike anything before. Um, what are your thoughts on AI when it comes to CEOs and leading a company? Do you think that there can be like an entirely, like they say, like agentic company where you have like a CEO agent, a CEO HR, CEO ops, or whatever that would look like? Or do you think there's still going to be this human AI kind of? Do you think humans are still going to be important?
So let's take a little journey to get to the answer of your question. So the first part is I guarantee there are CEOs out there today who are not going to call me because they're using ChatGPT. Okay, that's a threat. ChatGPT is cheap. I'm expensive.
Mm,
Now I offer something very very different than what you can get from ChatGPT, but it is a threat to not just my job but to every
yeah.
job. So that's one thing to recognize. So, what am I doing about that? I'm embracing AI. I'm deep into AI. I'm not writing code because that's not who I am, but I am leveraging every tool possible. And the reason I'm doing that is so one, I can be a better CEO coach.
Mhm.
And two, I can advise my CEOs on what they need to do inside of their company. And so there are three areas inside of companies that I talk to my CEOs about, and I push pretty hard that get them rolling if they're not or if they're already rolling to get them to rolling faster. One is using AI in the operations of the company. So I want them to be thinking about how can every single employee be using AI, whether it's a large language model or it's the AI built into now every piece of software that they have. How can we get people to be more productive as employees? Okay, that's number one. Number two is to have a particular focus on software development. So at this moment in time, that is the area that has had the greatest productivity boost is software development.
Okay.
And some companies embrace that, some are resistant to that. Some individuals are resistant to that in the leadership role, the CTO or the VP of engineering. And that means their organization is slowing down relative to their competitors who are embracing AI to help them build better software products. And then the third is how do we bring AI into the offering that we're presenting to the world, whether it's hardware or software? All of us have an opportunity to bring AI in, some more than others. So I'm dealing with a CEO right now. They're a very successful company. And we started talking about how do we bring AI into the product offering? And the good news is, he said, I said, What about all the data? And how much data do you have?" And he gave some massive number. I said, "Yeah, that's the foundation of AI. You have access to an enormous amount of data that can be highly effective for your customers, but you don't have a product yet to offer to them leveraging AI. That's what it's here for." And so those are the three areas I want them to think operationally. I want them to think particularly in software development. And then I want them to ask themselves, how can I incorporate AI into my offering? So in my role, I'm on the cutting edge of what's happening in AI, and I share this with all my CEOs. And then when they tell me something amazing they're doing, I never talk about who my CEOs are,
Mhm.
but I will get off one call and I'll jump on the next call and say, "Let me tell you what I just heard because it's amazing and it will change the way you're doing things."
Mhm.
Because I'm always learning best practices from the CEOs that I coach.
Mhm.
Now, will your bigger question was, will people be important? And yes, and so I want you to think about this. I'll just in the organizational design of companies of the future, we will have a mix of AI agents and humans. And somewhere on that org chart, we will have agents reporting to humans, and we will also have humans reporting to agents. It's going to happen. And we better get used to that. And it's going to happen faster than we thought it was going to happen. So, is it going to happen at the CEO level? I don't think so. I think that we're going to see the human at the top, and they're going to have agents on their leadership team, and they're going to have humans on their leadership team, and they're going to have to manage them both.
Wow. Yeah, I believe you. I don't know if you've seen like Hey Gen or some of these AI avatars,
Oh,
um,
sure.
but it's pretty good. And I could see you could create a clone of yourself, or just fabricate a clone that doesn't exist, just a unique kind of likeness of a
Oh,
human
I've done it. I've done it.
with
Yeah.
the voice, and that is Bob. That's your boss, and you just report to Bob and or Jill or whoever, uh, and then if you have like you feel Bob or Jill isn't like accurately kind of rating you, or you have some disagreement, you report to the HR or something, and they look at kind of quality control, and maybe Bob needs some tuning, or maybe it turns out that this isn't the company for you.
Right.
And Yeah, my goodness, it's kind of like we knew that, but once you articulate that, it's whoa, we're kind of there, or very soon we're there.
Yeah. Yes. So that's why I encourage every CEO in particular to be on top of what's happening so that they can design their organization the right way. They can be ahead of their competitors,
Mhm.
and they don't get left behind because anybody who's not paying very close attention to this will be left behind. And that's a scary thought.
I think there's a kind of a miscategorization, if that's the right word in this context, of thinking that I have access to a race car, so I don't need driving lessons from Glenn. And when it's like, yes, the supercomputer, the AI knows everything, but what's most important is knowing what questions to ask, and understanding how to synthesize that. I might ask it one question and get one answer, and I'm like, "Oh, Glenn, I got the answer. I don't need you." You're like, "Well, in that answer, there was three parts. Did you get all three?" I'm like, "What do you mean three?" And so it's like there's it scales is essentially my point, and I think you're only going to get more out of artificial intelligence with expert human guidance. I think that when there's legitimacy and earnestness, or like you're focused together, that's only going to increase the value. So, like I think you might have mentioned, and it's certainly been said that AI is probably not going to take someone's job, but AI with someone using AI will take someone not using AI's job. And
Absolutely
I
true.
think that
Yeah.
probably similar to coaching as well. And last thing I'll say on that, you brought up cost and how maybe working with a skilled human like yourself is going to be expensive. I think that that is relative, and when you look at the value that you deliver. So, in your
Exactly.
experience, you've unlocked hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue for organizations in your work history.
That's right.
Um, and so it's like, how do you monetize that? Like, I'm not going to put a number on it, but it's like, it all of a sudden an automobile seems like a small price to pay. And so I was wondering how you look at, maybe I should say, how do like clients that work with you typically look at, um, like, let's say the cost? Is it more like these are the goals, or is it like, how do you kind of determine if ChatGPT is free? But what are you? If that makes sense.
So um, here's how I think about it. It all comes down to value. You said that, and I agree with you. And for the CEOs that I work with, they don't even remember my cost because it's such a small element of the P&L. It's just a little tiny line item on the P&L. What they care about is their time. And are they getting value out of the time we were spending together?
Mhm.
And is that value a great multiplier over the value they might get from using AI? And one of the challenges with AI as a solution today is AI doesn't have the context, doesn't know what that employee we talked about 3 months ago did that's relevant to the decision you're about to make now, or the fraudulent activity that's happening in your market
Mm,
that will inform our decision here, or the emotion you're feeling right now that's changing the way you're thinking about this and making you a little less empowered in trying to make a decision. AI can't do any of that. It can answer some really good questions, but if ultimately it's very simple, if I'm not adding tremendous value in every single interaction I have with a CEO, then they shouldn't work with me. That's my own. What's really interesting about this is that's my own personal commitment to myself. I ask myself, David, why do I do this work? Why am I so excited about this kind of work? It's because I get a reward from adding value. And if I know I'm adding value in every interaction with my CEO, I'm going to keep doing this. And that's my dopamine, my oxytocin, my endorphins are coming in because I'm watching the CEO do something they wouldn't have done that's going to help them be a better CEO because of our interaction. As long as I can continue to do that, then I'm probably inexpensive relative to the value they're getting.
mm. You have experience in venture capital, and in some cases, you are like at the center of global venture capital. Certainly, one of the most well-known locations for it. What is the most misunderstood part of the investor founder dynamic?
So let's assume we're talking about a company that has a board of directors that is made up of investors.
Okay.
That's not always true at the earliest stage, but very quickly you graduate to that where you have a board made up of investors. And the biggest challenge here is that as much as the CEO would love to have the board in complete alignment with them, that's never the case. And that's a hard thing for CEOs to initially understand. And it's not because anybody's evil here. It's because an investor sitting on your board has a different set of objectives. They have a different set of constituents they need to serve. They need to serve their partners. They need to serve their own wallet in terms of return. They need to serve their limited partners. And so they are trying to do something with that investment that is simply not perfectly aligned with what the CEO is trying to accomplish. That's always the case. And going into it, if you understand that, then you can manage your relationships with your board members to create better alignment. But if you don't understand that there's a fundamental difference, sometimes it's small, sometimes it's big. But if you understand that, then you can manage so everybody wins. And CEOs sometimes struggle with that. And because it's a big challenge. It's not a simple thing to take care of. But if you're very aware of it and you understand what those motivations are over here on your board, then you can be highly successful because you need them on your side because the number one job of the board is to hire and fire the CEO. And so you need to create as much alignment as you possibly can.
Mhm. What are the non-negotiables you look for before joining a board?
I have to believe in the company. I have to believe in the CEO. I have to look for a board that is aligned as much as possible with the CEO. And I have to believe that the CEO is coachable because even if I'm not the CEO coach, I'm going to be providing some kind of insight, I hope, or some advice, I hope, that's meaningful to the CEO. But if they're not going to value that advice, then I'm wasting my time.
Mm. Well, your new podcast is called The Scaling CEO. Is
Correct.
there anywhere else that you would like to point people to follow along with what you're doing or get in touch with you if they would like to speak with you?
Yes, David. The easiest way is to just use my name.com. So it's glengow.com with two N's, and you can find everything you need to know about me or the podcast there.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Glenn, for speaking with us today. It was really eye opening. You had a lot of great analogies and insights, so appreciate it.
Very much enjoyed it, David. Thank you.